There are so many superheroes in the world that it's only natural they're going to tread on each other's territory. Every once in a while, two superheroes are going to come up against the same bad guy, or even against each other. But some superheroes are going to appear more similar than others. There's just too many superheroes around, and too many of them are written by the same writers as other superheroes. So that's why Deadpool and Spider-Man are going to share some smart alecky traits, and Captain America and Luke Cage might have a similarly life-altering experience in their past. Still, enough of these superheroes have their own unique traits that we can't get too mad. Sometimes, it's rather illuminating that characters share similar traits to people they'd rather have nothing in common with. Here are 10 things Marvel superheroes have in common. Remember, if you want to see more lists like this, subscribe to our channel and make sure to join our notification squad. But before we start, try your hand at our emoji challenge. What Marvel superhero is represented by this combination of emojis? Stay tuned for the answer at the end of our video, and be sure to keep watching for fun facts along the way.
It's not like we can just knock on the front door.
That's exactly what we're gonna do.
Luke Cage and Captain America both get their power from the Super-Soldier Serum. Everyone knows the story of how Steve Rogers got his superpowers. As a frail little weakling from Brooklyn with health problems, Rogers was rejected by the army during World War II because he was unfit to serve. Desperate to do his part, Steve volunteered to take part in Operation Rebirth, which meant being experimented on with the Super-Soldier Serum, which was being used to create the perfect soldier to fight against Hitler. After being given the serum, Rogers emerged with a perfect human body. He shipped off to Germany, punched Hitler in the face, battled with Red Skull, joined the Avengers, and now he's one of America's greatest heroes. But the origin story of Luke Cage shows the dark side of that super-soldier program. As an inmate of Seagate Prison, Luke Cage was recruited to participate in the secret medical research that was based on the earlier program. It was here that Dr. Noah Burstein put Cage in his electro-biochemical system, which altered Cage's genetic structure and gave him his super durable skin. As opposed to Steve Rogers, who wanted to serve his country, Cage was exploited by the government. His story was actually inspired by the Tuskegee syphilis experiment conducted by the US Public Health Service between the 1930s and 1970s, in which 200 African Americans were infected with syphilis under the guise of free healthcare. Together, Captain America and Luke Cage represent two sides of American life, as two people who were treated very differently by the government, even though they were both a part of the same super-soldier program. X-Man and Cable are both the sons of Jean Grey and Cyclops from an alternate universe. It's recently been announced that Josh Brolin will be joining Ryan Reynolds as Cable in the sequel to Deadpool. This fan-favorite character is sure to please fans of the series. Nathan Summers, as X-Men obsessives are sure to know already, has a convoluted and sometimes confusing origin. He is the son of Scott Summers, better known as Cyclops, and Madelyne Pryor, a clone of Jean Grey, and was born as part of a plan concocted by the nefarious Mr. Sinister. To prevent Nathan from becoming a threat to him, Mr. Sinister's mentor-turned-nemesis, Apocalypse, infected the baby with a techno-organic virus. And so, not long after being born, Nathan Summers was transported to the future where the virus could be treated. And that's where he grew up before returning to the regular timeline and teaming up with the New Mutants against Strife, who is also his clone. Phew! As for X-Man, also known as Nate Gray, well, his origin is pretty similar. Born as the son of Jean Grey and Scott Summers in the Age of Apocalypse storyline, he's basically a version of Cable without the techno-organic virus, which made him one of the most powerful mutants around, with vast telekinetic and telepathic powers. Listen, if you're confused, that's okay. You only have to read the multiple storylines that have been written about X-Man and Cable since the early 90s to figure it out.
Bad vibrations?
Marvel's gallery of Superman knockoffs. An age-old tradition of the superhero genre is the knockoff, in which Marvel and DC take general ideas from each other and make them their own. That's why you might find some similarities between Marvel's Thanos and DC's Darkseid, or DC's Green Arrow to Marvel's Hawkeye. The list goes on, but it's become something of a cherished tradition between the two publishers. That said, Marvel might have tried a little too hard when it came to creating their own version of Superman, which they've done many, many times. Take, for example, Hyperion, a man with super strength, super reflexes, atomic vision, which functions a lot like Superman's heat vision, and the ability to fly. His origin story is also suspiciously similar to an alternate universe version of Superman that appears in Superman Red Sun. Another Superman knockoff is Blue Marvel, who exists to explore what would have happened in the 1960s if the general population discovered that a highly popular Superman-like superhero was actually African American. Yet another Superman knockoff is Gladiator. This knockoff is so explicit that his government name, Kalark, is a combination of Superman's other names, Kal-El and Clark. We haven't even mentioned other Supes knockoffs like Wondar, the Aquarian, or Sentry. Keep in mind that all of these superheroes exist in the same universe and they all fly in the same sky. Do you think they ever bump into each other up there?
I'd love to keep this up, but I've only got one job here today and I gotta impress Mr. Stark, so I'm really sorry.
Spider-Man and Deadpool both have a snarky sense of humor. Those who are familiar with the irreverent, fourth-wall-breaking superhero Deadpool are probably aware that the fast-talking Wade Wilson is a huge fan of Spider-Man. At one point, Deadpool was even kidnapped by a coven of teenage Canadian witches who put a spell on Deadpool to summon his heartmate. Instead of Deadpool's wife, Spider-Man shows up, much to his annoyance. This is a sly commentary on the fact that Deadpool's design is similar to Spider-Man's, but also plays on Deadpool's irreverent attitude towards superheroes in general. Even when he likes his fellow spandex-clad heroes, he ends up liking them too much. At the same time, Spider-Man is definitely not cool with Deadpool's habit of killing people when he doesn't have to, or his amoral, wisecracking character traits in general. But it seems some of Deadpool's irreverent attitude has worn off on Spider-Man, who has become increasingly snarky since he came in contact with the Merc with a mouth. After all, they have more in common than they think. Both of them love to annoy Wolverine. Both of them crack jokes in order to hide their true emotions. Both are known for being smart alecks, even when they're surrounded by more serious brethren. Do you think Spider-Man will exhibit any Deadpool-like qualities in the upcoming Spider-Man Homecoming?
Congratulations, Duke. You just saved Paris.
G.I. Joe is based on Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. You probably know G.I. Joe from the popular action figures, the 80s TV show, or maybe the two big-budget films from a few years ago. What you might not know is that G.I. Joe was originally created as a 1940s comic strip known as Private Berger, which culminated in a live-action 1945 war film called The Story of G.I. Joe, starring Robert Mitchum and Burgess Meredith. But it wasn't until Hasbro released its iconic line of toys in the 1960s that G.I. Joe became a household name, and the franchise proliferated from there, most notably with the animated 1980s series, but also with a Marvel comic adaptation that lasted for several years in the 80s and 90s. So G.I. Joe became a team of highly weaponized military figures within the Marvel Universe, who fought against their adversaries in Cobra, a nefarious international terrorist organization. Does that sound familiar? Because it seems as though the G.I. Joe model took a whole lot from S.H.I.E.L.D., the military-like organization run by Nick Fury in the Marvel Universe. Even Cobra, the international terrorist organization named after a slimy creature, seems to be modeled on Marvel's Hydra, which is often depicted with an octopus symbol.
Suit up.
Captain Britain modeled after Captain America. You know what? This one's just obvious. In 1940, Joe Simon came up with the idea for Captain America for Timely Comics, and created Steve Rogers as a sort of propagandistic pro-American figure during the Second World War and the fight against the Nazis. After the war, Timely Comics eventually evolved into Marvel Comics in the 1960s, where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby reanimated Captain America, using the now familiar storyline that he had been frozen in a block of ice since the Second World War. Since then, Captain America has joined the Avengers and become a staple of the Marvel superhero lineup. As for Captain Britain, he was created in 1978 as the British equivalent of the Star-Spangled Avenger. As Marvel expanded its brand beyond the United States, they began to create superheroes of different nationalities, such as the most famous superhero, Wolverine, in order to market their comics abroad. And a British version of Captain America became one way to do that. Born as Brian Braddock in a small Essex village, he was transformed into the super-powerful Captain Britain by the wizard Merlin after a nearly fatal motorcycle crash. Since then, he's been upholding the laws of Britain with his powers. So, at least his origin story is pretty unique, possibly closer to Doctor Strange than Steve Rogers. What do you think? Is Captain Britain little more than Captain America, but across the pond?
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
Star-Lord and Han Solo. Back when Jurassic World came out, people remarked that Chris Pratt's outfit looked a little too similar to that of one Indiana Jones. At the time, rumors were going around that Pratt might replace Harrison Ford in the fedora for a reboot film about the globe-trotting archaeologist, but those never came to pass. Regardless, Indy isn't the only Harrison Ford hero whose style Chris Pratt has been stealing. Not only is Pratt Star-Lord, also known as Peter Quill, a roguish but good-hearted planet-hopping space criminal, he also has a penchant for wisecracking and sarcastic eye rolls. He's most certainly an anti-hero in the Han Solo mold, a figure who does the right thing even if he's a scoundrel. The Guardian of the Galaxy costume department paid homage to Han Solo by giving Star-Lord a similarly low-slung belt to carry his gun holster, playing up the similarities between these space cowboys and their predecessors from the era of Hollywood westerns. Now, you might be saying that Han Solo isn't a Marvel hero, and therefore shouldn't be on this list, but even before both Marvel and Star Wars came under Disney's ownership, Marvel was publishing Star Wars comic books between 1977 and 1986. In preparation for the release of Star Wars The Force Awakens, they began publishing a new Star Wars series about the characters from the original trilogy, meaning that Han Solo and the crew of the Millennium Falcon are, once again, Marvel heroes, even if they don't quite exist in the same universe, as far as we know.
You rise, only to fall.
Ultron and Vision are both AI. Fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are probably familiar with both of these characters from Avengers Age of Ultron. In that film, Tony Stark accidentally creates Ultron by developing an artificial intelligence that is programmed to maintain peace on Earth. Of course, this being a Marvel movie, things can't be that simple, and Ultron interprets this directive as one to eliminate the human species, leaving the Earth populated only by species unable to wage war against one another. Also introduced in that film was Vision, an android manifestation of Tony Stark's Jarvis operating system. At the end of the movie, Vision and Ultron share a calm moment where they debate the morality possibility of allowing humanity to exist, with Vision declaring that while humans may be destructive, there is grace in their failings. And that is why he chooses to side with the Avengers and to save the human species from Ultron's apocalyptic plan. Both of these characters are adapted from the Marvel comics, where, as in the movies, they are material manifestations of artificial intelligence. In the comics, however, Ultron is created by Hank Pym, aka Ant-Man, rather than Tony Stark. In the comics, Ultron creates Vision to help him lure the Avengers into a trap, but Vision is convinced to change sides and work with the Avengers to defeat Ultron and eventually become a member of the team. Given that they're both AI, what do you think are the key differences between these two characters? Multiple giant corporation CEOs. One hallmark of superhero comics is that they often have a character who runs an enormous major corporation, whether they're evil or good. In DC Comics, this includes superheroes like Bruce Wayne and Oliver Queen, who run Wayne Enterprises and Queen Industries, but also includes LexCorp, the giant corporation operated by Lex Luthor, the evil nemesis of Superman. Marvel is no different in this regard. Spider-Man's arch nemesis and the father of his best friend Harry is Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, who is the evil industry man in charge of Oscorp. As with Lex Luthor, Norman Osborn's nearly limitless financial resources make him a worthy adversary for Peter Parker, as he is constantly armed with the latest in high-tech weaponry from which he can terrorize New York City. But Norman Osborn isn't the only wealthy corporate man in the Marvel Universe. On the heroic side, both Tony Stark and Danny Rand spend time in charge of enormous companies named after their fathers. Of course, Iron Man begins his story as an arms manufacturer and the head of Stark Industries, but redirects his company into other fields after having a crisis of conscience. Still, he has the means to develop weaponry for his suit. Likewise, Danny Rand, aka Iron Fist, is involved with Rand Corporation, which is the scene of a conflict between him and Harold Meacham, his father's traitorous business partner. What do you think? Does being a rich businessman make you more likely to be involved in superheroic or supervillainous shenanigans?
So is this how you normally look?
More or less.
Hercules and Thor are both gods. Some of these superheroes are so powerful. Have you ever wondered if there's divinity at work? Well, most fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe know that Thor is a god. According to Nordic lore, Thor is the god of thunder, and the Marvel character's entire Asgardian backstory is based on those ancient myths. Odin, Thor's father, is another ancient god, while Loki, his brother, is the god of mischief. Likewise, the Marvel character of Hercules is based on the ancient Greek story of Heracles, the demigod son of Zeus. The most inspiring part of these stories is that they mean both the ancient Greeks and the ancient Norse myths were true. Interestingly, the upcoming Thor sequel is subtitled Ragnarok, which references the apocalypse of Thor mythology, when the world burns to ashes and is born anew. In the Marvel comics, Ragnarok is the name of a Thor clone, but it appears the movie is loosely based on the Planet Hulk storyline from the comics. As for Marvel's Hercules, he comes from a race of extra-dimensional beings known as the Olympians, all of whom are also based on Greek mythology. In the comics, both Thor and Hercules were members of the Avengers at times. Could they meet in the movies? Or would two deities be too many for our mortal eyes? Well, that's our list for the day. Are there any other superheroes that we should have included on this list? Is Spider-Man more similar to another superhero than to Deadpool? Do any other Marvel superheroes deserve a spot on the list for being played by actors named Chris? Let us know in the comments below. That's all for this list, but be sure to subscribe to the Screen Rant channel and sign up for the notification squad.